It's morning time here. It's March 11, 2022. My name is Cole Cooper. We are here with Cole's Truth. Another episode. Our guest today is Lincoln Nilsson. We're going to be talking today rather openly with more of a flow pattern of some of the topics that may or may not come to mind. But Lincoln and I are two people that are very interested in seeing that the expansion of freedom and human rights is a main priority in our country as well as for other nations and for all human beings or anyone that loves and values freedom. Before we begin, I wanted to spend a minute and draw everyone's attention over here to Brittany Annette Cooper's the resting place of her remains. Again, she was murdered on or about August 13th, 2021. Although the investigation is ongoing, we still are waiting for an arrest, and we have faith that the system will run its true course and that justice will be done there. So I want to say that we're grateful for her sacrifice in the cause of freedom. Lincoln, would you take a minute and introduce yourself to the audience in whatever fashion you'd like to?
Oh man, I'm Lincoln. I'm from Preston, Idaho for originally, however, 18-ish years. I guess I tried to run off before that, so I'm going to call it a whole 18 years. And as soon as I turned 18, gone to, the next biggest town across the state border in Utah, up to Logan. I was there for about 10 years, of which, kind of there for 10 years, considered it residency for 10 years. 5 of those years were spent incarcerated, spread out from age, 18 and a half until, 26.
Well, if you don't mind,
I think it was...
sharing with us, why were you incarcerated at age 18? What was the main reason, do you think, for that?
That was a pretty ridiculous sort of a thing. It was met a kid in Logan through some other friends who I was kind of kicking it with on the regular. Then we were all getting fucked up. It was like, oh, I'm 18 and I'm going to go learn all these things that I couldn't get the truth about from the institutions, like family, church, state, any of the education. None of those places would give you honest, straight-up information about drugs in particular. I came to find of great interest. Also, religion, afterlife, these topics, it was pretty apparent they were either ignoring or intentionally obfuscating the truth. And on a ninth monkey sort of basis, or fifth monkey, however many monkeys it is, where they're just running from the hose and they don't even know, or they're running from the banana even though they're not getting the hose. It's like they didn't know any better because they've been taught bullshit, and their parents before them and before them they've been taught bullshit. And as far as I could distinguish with absolute certainty, the absolute latest that began in American history was Prohibition. Which, when they finally caved on the alcohol, continued in the form of the drug war before it was ever called that. Where it comes to find out, if you do your research, cannabis was the most used medicine in the world for a number of years leading up to the 1920s, when the Hearst Corporation, in conjunction with Harry Anslinger, the nation's equivalent of Office of National Drug Policy Control Director's position today, or drug czar, as they like to call it, when they collaborated to manufacture the word marijuana because they knew they could never get away with taking cannabis away from people. So they fabricated this word out of, just because to essentially pin it on the Mexicans, turn it into a racially divided issue, and make it sound like this big, terrible, evil thing that would make all the Latino men rape white women. And this again, I believe, was Mississippi, if I'm not mistaken. One of the southern states, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, where the Hearsts, and who was it? I don't think they were into the paper. I think that was, I don't recall the paper corporation.
That's okay. We don't need to memorize all these.
Or maybe the Hearsts owned the paper and the newspaper, apparently. But, it was a collaboration of bullshit amongst government and corporations. Some legitimate crony capitalism at its finest, about approximately 100 years ago, this decade. And, you start to find out these just glaringly obvious lies that serve to start cracks in the facade of the system which we live under. Which, essentially is still a feudalist system. We're the peasants and the serfs serving, the business class who serves the noblemen and the wealthy who, essentially do nothing but chatter amongst each other and organize people who are talented and brilliant. There's exceptions, but we can say with a generalization that it's probably accurate, that it's not too far off from where we stand today. So, yeah, and it probably started a little bit before that, as far as the formation of it went. We could say that's when we went to fear as a guiding policy officially in the United States. And we decided, you know what, the Hegelian dialectic is the proper way to go. We'll create the problem so that it will engineer the reaction, and we will hand feed them this preordained solution before we even started the problem. And so this has been the basis for us going to war with Japan in World War II, and this drug war that we've decided. And then almost 80 years later, we decided to refresh it brand new and bright and shiny in American consciousness with the War on Terror and the Patriot Act. So, this has been ongoing things for my entire life. I've got to kind of grow up and be conscious enough and present enough and aware enough when these things happened to absolutely see through the bullshit outright. Without question or hesitation. The first thing I saw when the World Trade Center tower was coming down, the first video I saw of it was before I had heard anything about it. I woke up, did my thing before work, and then headed in. I was 18, and I believe at that time I had decided to opt out of my senior year. And I had gone on a little road trip, ended up arrested in Texas, back in Idaho, September of 01. Not very far before, maybe 4 or 5 days before 9/11 actually happened. And this is dial-up AOL days for Preston, Idaho, out in the middle of nowhere. So you've got the splash screen. It comes up as soon as you log on. World Trade Center, smoking. Some clickbait headline, which, I don't know if anybody recognized things as clickbait back then. Common vernacular now, clickbait headline. Yeah. That was just so absurd that I pretty much just dismissed it as, they're fear-mongering again. They're trying to scare us into being afraid of this terrorist thing that's kind of a non-issue as far as I could tell. And then, as I was going through, just the splash screen, getting rid of stuff and seeing if there's anything interesting, ended up clicking on the picture of the World Trade Center being hit just on the basis of what kind of garbage are they trying to feed us now. So it pulls up and it's talking about, has the World Trade Center has been struck by airplane, and going on about trying to explain the official story, which, seemed okay on the surface at the media level, because they're obviously not going to have the whole story that early on anyway. But as it turns out, they did have a remarkable amount of the story ready to go, details that would have been...
Felt like it was practiced.
Well, the thing is, so I click on this, and, it's a GIF image, because videos are just out of the question for a dial-up connection.
Net zero.
And you know, I see this thing, you know, falling down in you know, low frame rate GIF sort of a format, and I just think, wow, did they do a controlled demolition on this tower just to, you know, and then say, oh look, this is what terrorism could look like? Because I'm still not even realizing this is like a real thing, because that's just how credible the media was to me at that point already. And the first thing I thought was, that looks exactly like the controlled demolitions that they've done in Vegas, all the different casinos and properties that they've torn down, that Discovery aired live on TV and in repeat also for the entire 90s. I mean, all of them.
Well, I would say it even looked more.
How many of them have they aired after 9/11 since?
You know, I haven't seen
Zero. Now, why do you suppose they decided, whoa, maybe we shouldn't show this controlled demolition physics? Because it's too damn familiar. Like, yeah, I don't know how many other people, you know, that were watching a lot of Discovery or whatever in the 90s, you know, adolescents, teens, maybe younger, who also saw that and just automatically could tell that was exactly, you know, controlled demolition.
I've never seen a more flawless demolition.
No, it was masterfully executed.
It almost speaks of something extra.
Well, right, but
beyond.
But that's it. That's just it. It was so masterfully executed that really cuts down on the number of people or involved. You know,
Aiming
that
in on
people are
itself.
qualified to even be possible to do it, and then have the time and access to set all of that up. I mean, there's theories that float around about a lot of those explosives were placed when they built it or whatever. And I don't think that's the case at all. But
was this before your incarceration?
Yeah. This is when I was 17. Like because I turned 18 the following February. I was 17 when I decided to do the road trip and get arrested in Texas.
Well,
on account of the company I kept.
And I just wanted to include it. Brittany told me when she was alive, she had been arrested for saving a young man's life, calling 911 who overdosed on heroin. And of course, she was arrested from the things that they found there in the paraphernalia and charged. Today, under the law, that would be, she'd be protected. You know, it's bad public policy not to call when someone's dying. So, under the Good Shepherd laws and stuff. Good Samaritan. Although Good Shepherds might do the same thing, right?
I don't know. You say Good Shepherd, and I just start thinking Irish food.
Right. And that's what I love about Lincoln.
Scottish.
He's always thinking. She told me that when 9/11 took place, it was almost as if in Las Vegas, where she was incarcerated at age just over 18, with a artificial hip, and I won't go into that story right now, but that they locked down the prisons and everyone left, the guards and everyone left, and so basically the prisoners were left
New Orleans.
left alone in the facility as if they didn't matter in the Department of Corrections, as if the rest of the world would not be watching.
New Orleans had that same problem during what was it, Hurricane Katrina?
You know, and I really think it's a cause for concern that I think that the people should start paying attention to what the guidelines are. What are the plans if America were under some sort of martial law or something? Those that don't have a voice, those in the prison system, because there's a lot of innocent people. We know that.
Well, a lot of those instances, I mean, that's a failing on not only the institutions, the artificially formed institutions such as the governments and the private prisons and the corporations involved, but also the supposed support structure of these people. Like, their families drop the fucking ball.
Yeah.
I mean, the ones that have them. I mean,
Talk a little bit about that. I think that would be, something. And of course, we're going to have a lot of discussions. I anticipate about a variety of subjects, and we may or may not become more detailed about certain areas, depending on where the interest is with the audience.
Well, and the thing is with that is I don't know a whole lot about the institutional angle on that, because that was before I was really being before I was like getting into much trouble. I mean, like, the arrest in Texas was when it was 17 and a half ish. and because they allegedly pulled us over for not wearing seatbelts, spotted from a parked highway patrolman in Texas, parked at a rest area, off the freeway.
Just had amazing eyesight. Or
Yeah, he had incredible
Eagle eye-
eyesight.
eagle eye vision
No,
from-
but the reality of it is simply that one of the hitchhikers that we picked up was a paralegal from Florida who, and that sounded like, sort of trustworthy, at least knowledgeable, sort of a guy to have around. Turns out he's a kleptomaniac, and every time we stopped the car, he's ripping off some retailer or newspaper machine for a roll of slugs that somebody else has already ripped off the newspaper machine with, and just a bunch of dumb shit. And so we get pulled over, and it's him and an army defector we picked up in Vegas.
an army. Tell me about the army defector. That's interesting too.
I don't know a whole lot about him. All I know is his grandpa lived in Alabama. That's where he was trying to get to, and if we could get him there, he would make sure, he would see to it that if we wanted to work or have something set up to where we had a direction to go, that he make sure that he'd get us on board with his grandpa and his connections or whatever locally.
Age 17. That's very appealing offer.
And
I
integrate
think,
us, integrate us in the community. Well, I was like, well, cool, it's better than Utah.
Well, yeah.
I've never been there.
Logan, well, absolutely. I don't blame you.
Adventure,
It's adventure.
I'm 17, adventure. So we pick him up in Vegas and start jetting, stop in a few places along the way, see some people we know, whatever. But he thinks we're 18. Hitchhiker in El Paso, this paralegal guy thinks we're 18. So when we get pulled over and the cops start asking them about being with us, they about shit themselves and totally forgot, anything about their originating problems for being stopped to begin with. Like the klepto dude, he I don't know, he clammed up pretty good. He knew better than to say much.
Well, it sounds like that.
But
You're a really free spirit, Lincoln, and I like that about you. You seem to travel a lot of places. What is it about people and about freedom and about truth or any of those subjects? What guides you to want to bring out a message or start to share your own story and encourage others to do so about something people should hear? Maybe the audience have never heard anything about these sorts of things.
We've got to pop the bubble and disillusion ourselves. We have to reprogram ourselves individually from within in order to not just be programmed by our environment, by our surroundings, by our media, and by the exposure to the bullshit. I mean, it was so solid and so effective and so efficient coming into the 90s because of the isolation and essentially monopolization through intelligence of the media. Like, there was not a lot of places to get information outside of your county.
Well, speaking of that, when one's
So
incarcerated, what kind of information are you going to get?
Right, so it's really easy to control the information, which means it's really easy to control what people believe, and create an official narrative, write history books however the fuck you feel like. Which, we get that that's kind of how it goes with war, in particular, since the beginning of time. But this is like, essentially, the United States of America government so prolifically and just integratedly gaslighting its own people that it trickled down through state governments and even into local governments, where it was less of a, they're doing it, we can do it too, so much of where I saw it in Preston, it was a,
That brings up a good question. Who are they, right? The government, they.
Well,
you heard a lot from people, they.
Right. But that's how it gets framed.
Right.
Especially,
that's exactly
especially
my
like
point.
I say, what I observed in Preston, what the experience was for me there was the justification for their behavior, rather than having a difference of we're better than them, or they can do it, we can do it too, was more of a, well, they're all criminals anyway.
That's kind of a general.
Right. Just I'm saying the chief of police and the mayor and some of the other people in Preston. There were people there was a school board member who was also the head of juvenile probation and parole.
There wasn't any conflict of interest.
Oh no, I was asking everybody about it. Well, wasn't that a conflict of interest? And in Preston, the proper thing to do is to not stir shit up, because it's like a 95% Mormon community at the time, and man, we couldn't we couldn't go out there and hold accountable a tithe-paying member of the Mormon Church.
Yeah, I mean, we need an objective group of people to actually check to see if there's some sort of conflict. I know within the Utah Board of Pardons and Parole.
Well,
that,
I think the rationalization and justification in Franklin County, Idaho at the time, and Preston, Idaho in particular, was simply that there are not enough people to do all of these jobs, maybe, because I mean, really, it's a complete crock and line of bullshit. But for him to have weaseled his way in like that reeks of.
Does you look in the mirror
of
and ask yourself, am I doing a good job?
Right, it reeks of intentionality, because as an adult human being, you ought to be able to recognize the conflict of interest, especially when you're working with the legal aspects of the lives of minors and their families.
Well, how many people really look into what happens to minors or to juveniles or to convicted after the
anybody
trial? Or to anyone
who has
really.
sat in front of a judge and admitted guilt.
Or felt the rest to the point that they had to admit guilt.
On the basis of an abrogation of constitutional rights.
Right.
A plea bargain is a way to walk around a speedy trial.
Yeah,
it's a way for them to say,
expand on that.
Let's just not do this Constitution thing for the efficacy of all these bullshit laws that we've made up that are so fucking ridiculous and impossible to enforce with any sort of equality under the letter of the law, that nobody's going to have any respect for them, or you know, and they're going to end up being used as arbitrary opposition control. Like
essentially, everybody becomes a lawbreaker, and how do you have respect for
right,
the law?
right.
Everybody
is then in a position of being a criminal. So yeah, it becomes
how do you pick and choose?
It becomes just as political as the vying for the positions of things like prosecutor or judge. Or, you know,
or prosecutors,
governor.
You know, judge, we say, are the gatekeepers, right? And that we're all officers of the court. What's your experience with the prosecutor and their legal acuity, or their ability to present the true facts and be the ministers of justice that they deem to be?
I have never heard of nor seen any evidence to suggest that any prosecutor anywhere has had the intent of showing all the evidence that's before them. They absolutely exclude exculpatory evidence all of the time, almost in every case, no matter how minor or how major it is. And rather than presenting that and taking a second look at things, that's when they just say, "Oh, well, we'll go for a plea bargain instead," which is most of 90% of the time.
And I'm not agreeing or disagreeing, but you're making some pretty strong statements. And where are you drawing upon experience, knowledge?
I spent a lot of time in courtrooms because I didn't post bail. couldn't ever really afford to post bail for all the little minor things I got hemmed up on and the major things I got hemmed up on. So I got to go to court a lot, in shackles and chains and jumpsuits, and sit there and watch the court proceedings.
Now, doesn't that seem backward?
And then I get to go
majority
back,
of people are going from jail.
But then I get to go back to the jail and have people asking these questions, you know, or just, you know, who the fuck, you know, does this seem right to you? Because they're confused because they're fucking public defender, they're public appointed, you know, attorney or whatever the hell, however it's worded, counsel.
Did you have a lot of experience where you got to talk with them? Or?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it got to be a point where everybody. I mean, well, I'd start to spout the factual history of, you know, the drug war and the likes of, hey, this is all bullshit. This is the stuff we've been fed our entire lives. How can we trust these people that have put us here? Especially knowing just where the laws come from that have put us here, because, you know, I mean, almost everybody's on some sort of a drug or drug-related offense.
Did you think the prosecutors or even the public defenders or even the judges understood what drugs were, how they affected people?
Oh, absolutely not. They're propagandized right to the core. They just recited the routine. Drugs are bad. This is your brain on drug. You know, just like absolute, just.
Were they ever
zero
able to differentiate with any sort of accuracy
occasionally,
what kind of drugs?
As it progressed, and after the millennium, I did see. I mean, the drug courts started to pop up, which was a noble idea, which immediately turned into a cash cow and just more extortion of the poor, really. works for some.
You're
Wasn't
talking
really.
about the drug programs, and that's a good
Well,
point.
well,
to bring
drug
up.
court specifically, other drug
How
programs
effective do you
similarly.
think they are, really, in the long run? Looking at
They're as effective
The
as
macrocosm.
they're as effective as the individual who's subject to them can make it be in their own experience. That being said,
if we took a poll of 10 years, somebody that used drugs and was entered into some sort of court-ordered probation or drug program, what do you think? I don't think we could come up with a statistic.
well,
Would it be sobriety?
there are recidivism rates,
Right.
and those are tracked. And I don't know what they are today or currently, but I mean, I believe when I was getting locked up and force fed into some of these drug programs, they were quoting like 85-90% recidivism amongst the general population.
And I think
And
that's
then-
a
and
really
then-
good estimate for them.
And then in the drug programs, they're saying like I want to say no, I don't want to say, but if I remember right, it was like 10 or 20% or no, 20-ish% less than that.
I know what
but-
other population samples are and how those statistics
Yeah,
are getting or even taken.
I'd really have to look. That'd be interesting.
Well, not
information,
even you. I
actually.
just wonder how they're coming up with these statistics when, like you
Right.
mentioned.
Well, the thing is recidivism is they're recommitted crime, like they're coming back to prison or whatever the case may be. It has nothing to do with drug use or abuse, and I mean, really, in the courts, there's not any differentiation between use and abuse anyway. It's just all, oh, you're in the courtroom because of drugs. It's automatically abuse. But they're not mental health professionals, so they're really not qualified to make that decision to begin with. And neither the legislators who fucking parroted the federal laws into place for federal funding, for their highways or whatever. Idaho hung out on alcohol. 19 was the drinking age until I believe 1989. And they finally folded when the federal government says, well, you're not getting your highway money if you don't follow our rules, kind of a thing. And it wasn't even an outright, like, put that way. It was codified. And then, the issue of enforcement came up based on, I don't know whose complaints or prying or pushing, but it's essentially a flea flicker of fucking states' rights. Like, hey, look this way, and just trampled over everything. And I mean, and after they've run over the entire country with federal regulation across all the state levels, they've backpedaled on speed limits. The states can have speed limits back.
They developed this matrix to.
The sentencing matrix?
The proposed goal, was some sort of uniformity that was supposed to be gained by having a group of people, and I've noticed and I've heard many judges in my experience voice their concerns about the expertise and where these recommendations are coming from. Who are these people that are giving these recommendations from the Department of Corrections, probation officers, or who are these people that are taking upon themselves to be experts? Would they be qualified as an expert witness during a trial? And then does that take with the judge's role as a gatekeeper and the judge's ability to...
If I had to take a guess, just based on who's got the time and resources to track the numbers on the inmates and the beds available and the beds filled, and how to maximize that into profitable income or maximum beds filled for the purpose of getting federal money, which is what the drug programs in the prisons and institutions mostly became about, for the actual administrative people in the prison. Meanwhile, the people on the ground, the counselors, the inmates on both sides, they're trying to want to make something work, but they're doing it in a facility that still is pretty much run by gangs. And you really can't be doing a lot of the types of things that they want you to do, especially in the therapeutic community models, that don't potentially endanger your life.
And why is it that after all these years that we are calling these corrections, now punishment, I would, in and of itself,
Same reason the Department of War became the Department of Defense, because doublespeak is real and it's written at the legislative level.
What kind of steps do you think that people that aren't really aware of some of these issues and the conditions that are faced when a person is incarcerated. I don't know that people are aware, or even some
no,
of
the people who haven't
things that
been
go on.
there, the people who haven't been there are blissfully ignorant of it, simply because they can't deal with it. Like when their loved ones are telling them about what's going on, if they're not absolute 100% stoics, or like, oh, I did the crime, I'll do the time, blah blah blah, you know, they're not. They'll hear them saying it, but they are not listening at that point, because they know that means, oh well, this is an institutional problem at a big level, especially when you're talking about state prisons or federal prisons, and and at that point it's already a problem so much bigger than anything they can wrap their head around. That I would say the confirmation bias and the uncognitive dissonance in conjunction just don't allow them to process what it means, the things that they're hearing from their people who have been in there. They don't understand, or they just have zero comprehension whatsoever of what human rights are supposed to be, in addition to constitutional rights. And so they don't feel like there's oh well, I mean, you're the one that's in prison and shit, you know.
Did you have to buy your own pillow?
I mean, essentially, I believe in Utah
I know I had to buy pillows for Brittany.
I know in Utah they did issue them. Idaho they did not.
And these pillows, for instance, they were
Garbage anyway.
right. I mean, what kind of food in general were people receiving in your
Facility to facility is different everywhere you go. Like
what's the best food, do you think? How would you rate it with, say, fast food, or would it compare? Would it be even?
There was stuff that I had that was better than fast food.
Well, that's good.
Like Summit County in Utah, dude, their food was.
And I think we should give some credit to
really actually higher quality than most people get to eat on the day to day.
That's excellent. That's excellent.
The portions were so meager that it just about made you want to beat people up and steal their shit, so you could have more of it, because they were, underfeeding.
Would that be so that they could make some money off commissary? Do you see any connection between that, correlation?
Oh well, yeah. In the instance, I can't speak specific to Summit in that instance, but I would say that in a lot of the facilities I have been through, yes, absolutely, because their kitchens are being supplied by the same people as their commissaries. And a lot of that is generally a civilian who's say the kitchen manager, who gets to make the decision as to what things are being purchased with the budget that they've been allowed. So if the budget is improper, then they don't have enough. In most instances, it's them cutting corners and pocketing the rest.
Well, food's what do we call that? One of the basic staffs of life. So human beings need to eat food, and I understand that there's programs. So wouldn't you think that a great portion of the federal fund should go for food if they needed money for food?
Your rare source of only authentic real meat protein that comes in a box that is marked in big black letters on the side, probably Arial, 84.96.
What about special diets, vegetarians?
Not for human consumption. And this is what you're feeding to 350 people on at least once a month for the chicken, it was.
And it's
but yeah, no, marked plainly on the box, not for human consumption. And
do you have any idea where some of this came from, or where did you see these things?
I do know that the provider for that particular jail at that particular time was Aramark.
Do you know more about Aramark?
I know that they're a huge, what is at this point, conglomerate of service industry. They do laundry, uniforms, food, commissary. They've really, as far as what I can see, have kind of targeted the incarcerated markets, because there's an incredible amount of space for price leveraging and, essentially usury and extortion of inmates who are also, for primary purposes, and low-income persons.
So
it's like, we're going to rob from the poor some more. Just like, the cannabis is marijuana now. Same sort of model, where let's extort the plebes and the serfs and the regular people.
Well, drug crime convictions in general, what's your position on...
There are not drug crime convictions. There are drug crime pleas. Don't make that mistake.
Explain a little bit more.
Well, again, the plea bargain system is a complete runaround from the Constitution. It's this right to a speedy trial you have. Well, we're going to extort you out of that by throwing charges at you that are ridiculously exaggerated.
Well,
In order to come back at you with a plea bargain that might be in the ballpark of where you were at with your criminality, which is still absurd because, frankly, where the fuck is the victim and why aren't they on the stand testifying?
Well, and that brings up a problem that Brittany and I started
That's
to tackle.
why they don't. That's what the plea bargain system is for, though. Is oh well, we don't have a victim, so we don't really have a crime, even though we've legislated that we're supposed to be enforcing this bullshit that serves to absolutely help the pharmaceutical companies and industries monopolize that whole racket, because a doctor is just a drug dealer with the government sanction, but you can only sell patented, pharmaceutically derived products that are under trademark and copyright and patent and absurd profit margins.
Well,
The only reason OxyContin exists is because morphine only costs 15 cents a liter to manufacture and makes zero money for anybody unless they absolutely price gouge, and everybody knows that now because I mean how long it's been around, how simple it is.
Well, and I want to bring up a point that I've noticed that a lot of courts were obfuscating when COVID began, and that was, number one, the impact of COVID with the felony on felony rule and people being incarcerated and then taking plea deals. And when people are incarcerated and they're not allowed to get out, and then the trials are being put out indefinitely, which absolutely triggers your right to a speedy trial concerns. And then the felony on felony policy, I fail to understand the constitutionality, and aren't all crimes becoming
What's the felony on felony?
questionable if they're all done under duress now? Aren't all of the...
The entire court system's under duress.
Well, especially since COVID.
Every criminal proceeding
it's
that
a
is
concern.
not a jury by trial is
Whether they're voluntary pleas,
is-
or they were duress, coerced.
Well, they are all every single one of them. That's why the charges are trumped up, and they are allowed to do lesser included offense as a part of the conviction, which is again bullshit to the core. We're going to trump this up so that you will plead down to this lesser crime that we might have a chance of convicting you of. But if you take it to trial, we can still convict you of this lesser offense, and then use that as an excuse to make your sentence harsher. And that's what they're going to threaten you with from your own public defender. This news comes.
No, I find that very, and a lot of times if you're going to exercise your right to have a preliminary hearing to see if the case could be bound over for trial, the prosecutors oftentimes would not want to do the extra work if they'd even done any at all. And the defendant could face extra punishment or adding additional crimes,
The fact of the matter is,
amending the complaint.
is that if people would simply recognize that they have a right to a speedy trial, demand that right, they would have to start throwing out a lot of these bullshit, ridiculous. I mean, sure, there are legislated laws that were placed under really old lobbying, essentially. A lot by pharmaceuticals. I mean, there's a lot of other players, depending on which drug you're talking about and why they want it gone. But
Also evidence, the Brady v. Maryland requirement that all the evidence is provided, so that a proper defense in the Fifth and Sixth Amendment can be made.
right, and not providing exculpatory evidence. And this is also problematic with in my experience personally.
Wasn't that a crime?
The
under
public
definition?
defender that I was assigned, he was perfectly aware of everything that the prosecutor failed to introduce and to the record, and did zero to interject or to put it in. Like at that point, that's his job. To make the correction where the prosecutor has failed, especially when it's in regards to exculpatory evidence, records of proceedings, records of negligence, or that indicate negligence and dereliction of duty, in regards to specifically the discovery of exculpatory information. And yeah, at that point, what are you supposed to think other than these people are either incompetent or in collusion, in conspiracy?
Yeah. That would
And-
violate section
and
241.
it's hard to tell, and it's hard to tell which, because to be honest with you, a lot of them are incompetent. A lot of them don't understand what it is. A lot of them don't understand what's going on. A lot of them went to law school. Well, you know what? Law school is about as effective as medical school. And if you could find me a medical school that has a program that isn't sponsored by a pharmaceutical company, maybe I'll find a doctor that I trust somewhere. But good luck with that. But it's the same sort of a situation, you know, with the other on the other side. It's not even necessarily.
Was there a way out of this, do you think? Some of these problems? Or are we just fucked?
Well, I mean, if anybody in the legal process would just stand the fuck up in court on the record and say, "What about this?
Do admire that.
What about, you know, we've got these other things here that kind of, you know, have play a role in how we proceed." You
Now,
know,
what is the preponderance of evidence in a criminal trial? Beyond a reasonable doubt, so there's a real possibility that someone might be innocent, then you must find them innocent?
well, I mean,
you could find a different
the thing
definition.
is though, is the incompetence is so rife in the legal system that it doesn't even matter if a person committed a crime or not, because they don't follow basic legislative procedure. So they're not following the law in order to convict you of laws that are ridiculous and absurd to begin with, and probably unconstitutional on so many levels that it's almost comical. And
Well,
and
you
the whole
look at
thing,
the rules of statutory construction,
and that-
supremacy
and that-
clause, and
yeah, and that breeds an atmosphere in which, oh, well, nobody really trusts the police anymore because they're forced to enforce these laws that nobody believes in, and so it creates a division amongst law enforcement and then the people. And so now you've got this environment where you've got shit like Chris Dorner happening, where he gets
Chris
fucking-
Dorner, tell him that, Chris Dorner.
Oh yeah, everybody forgot about him. The media totally, what do you call it? Memory hold him. He was the officer in L.A. who tried just. He got frustrated, got pissed off, and just started screaming at the top of his lungs, "Man, the corruption is real. This is some bullshit. I'm gonna drop some evidence."
Good for you, Chris.
And and then they ended
You're a
up.
whistleblower, right?
Well, it tried to be, but he went about doing it in such a way that he ended up being burned alive to death in a cabin out north of L.A.
Maybe
somewhere.
I'll share some experiences about that. Maybe you will too, right?
Well, yeah,
In the
we'll get back.
Well,
We'll get back
people
around
share
to
that.
Chris Dorner, but I mean,
Yeah.
and then you know,
Retaliation
and then
for
these,
whistleblowing, yeah.
but then
Yeah.
and then all these other
Very common.
publicized events, and don't get me wrong, anything publicized by the media is probably something that was orchestrated and engineered, because they don't do anything on accident. But I mean, the police have killed a number of people all over the country of multiple colors and multiple genders, and you know, all, the exclusive thing. Either they are low income or oppositional. Like, and it doesn't even have to be oppositional to a party specifically, just saying, hey, you guys are fucked, and this, like me, like, I just, like, you know, this whole system's fucked, and you're all just circle jerking each other in this big old conflict of interest, of negligence and dereliction, and just patting each other on the back saying good job for work not even done.
Well, you know, one thing I failed to do earlier, but I just wanted to also give our thanks to the coalition of We the People for the Resurgence of the Constitution, which are a group of professionals, regular citizens, police officers, attorneys, judges, interest groups, anyone really that's interested in freedom and the expansion of human rights and
addressing it in the law of the legal system.
and addressing, and the coalition has been forming, and you know, they're now able to write amicus curiae. They're able to write support for different constitutional positions and to actually tackle the hard issues. And we do appreciate the good that the ACLU does, but a lot of these issues that are really, really important, that have to do with fundamental rights, equal protection,
the
been ignored.
ACLU is kind of in the same position as everybody else in the country, even though they're a huge organization. If they're gonna, you know, really try and stand up for what's right and speak up and be loud about it, there's enough power behind the suppression that they might reap some pretty ultimate rewards for that. People might die, I think. Like if they were to stand up and say, well, we're going to do something that's not just a political hot button issue that we're going to make a bunch of money on quick and actually say we're going to do a long battle and fucking fix some shit that's wrong with the Constitution and civil
Their hands
liberties.
have been tied, I think.
I don't.
Some
well,
of the
they might.
members- some of the members
even at
that
their
want
size
to.
and even with a lot of pro bono work, they might not have the budget for that.
Well, the budget and actually
And-
the
and-
authorization.
And because of the politicization of a lot of the cases that they do take, it's going to be hard for them to raise the funds to get the budget to do that, because people aren't going to have the faith in them that they're going to need to do that. Like they've kind of set their own course a little bit, and it's adrift, and everybody sees it, and they're looking at them like, "Wow, you guys, that's like, if we come back to get you, we all go down," because.
Well, we definitely don't want our system to go down. We need a judicial system in place, or else,
Right.
I mean, what could happen, right?
Well,
It's scary with all these cases that are starting to just be prolonged, that are backing up in the court system, that are clogging the court system, and a lot of the reason is being blamed on COVID-19. And then we've got the Sixth Amendment violations, and then we've got the prospect of someone or a group of government or an agency saying that, well, we have exigent circumstances, we better streamline this, and people start having their constitutional rights ignored further. We don't want to lift the precedent of having constitutional courts and then breaking the precedent of the Constitution being the supreme law of the land, and the states having to follow a minimum of constitutional rights, but being allowed to expand those.
Well, COVID's another good example of government gaslighting its own people. Because, I mean, the CDC themselves wrote a paper on how masks are basically ineffective outside of a hospital environment. They don't do shit. Like zero correlation to infection rates and exposure. One thing we do know, that we've had a flu season for decades and decades and decades, and you know what people do during that flu season that causes that flu season? They all stay the fuck home inside with each other. They all do exactly what they were told to do by the CDC and by like a lot of our government agencies and officials, and they quarantine essentially. And then they all give each other everything. Like the quarantine order was to try and get as many people sick as possible.
Did you and
Well,
my wife and I had a number of clients start to tell us over the phone that there were employees of Department of Corrections or otherwise, individuals wearing hazmat suits, and when some of the people were known to have COVID-19, they were all put into the same area of the facility, as if almost it was purposely done, that certain people would become infected. In fact, I had another client that was a big name case in the state of Wisconsin, Sackett. It's worth a Google. And I have those recordings, and he was very concerned that these people knowingly had COVID and that they were putting them all in the same room. But yet, when we'd go to visit some of these places, then we weren't allowed to because of the COVID concerns. And so I kind of was concerned about that concern.
Well, I mean, when you start to look at this logically, I mean, what panning out in my head, and I've not heard much about this prior, is that, well, you've got to keep the people who we've got out of the public eye and out of the speaking space, and a lot of the political oppositional, media or whatever, the heads of their groups and organizations. We've got to keep them quiet, even though we've got them out of society. They're still having an impact. They're still getting having an influence.
Liabilities.
Exactly.
Those that tend to know things tend to be liabilities, and I know something about that. And that
free thinkers are dangerous.
That will be shared as time goes on. And of course, our purpose here is not to destroy the system, but to find some solutions, to find some way that we can work within the system and weed out the corruption with the least disturbance to the system in place. But we can't go on. It's not going to return to the same after COVID.
I'll quote into the Declaration of Independence and stuff. This is the American experiment. Man, we haven't failed, but we have definitely not succeeded. But I mean, that's where
Why
I
is it
wrote.
that we
and that's-
incarcerate so many
but that's-
people in our country?
Yeah,
And not
at,
call
at,
it-
at a rate unheard of by any other nation on earth in history. It's a profiteering. It's we are the land of the profit on the serfs and peasants suffering.
And isn't that scary that people are
Like it's a
making
land of
media of
you've
shows
got
based
mental
on
health issues
incarceration?
or you've been hurt or abused. Let us hurt and abuse you some more so that your kids will most certainly feel that pain and continue that cycle and feed the fucking morbidity of whatever.
Well, that leads on to another issue too. As an attorney, we all take an oath of office. The military, an oath of office is taken, and allegiance is pledged to freedom, to the Constitution. But when is it that those that are enforcing the law, when is it okay to break the law? So it means of enforcing the law, we need to look at these different immunities.
You mean
These
equal
governmental
application under
immunity
the law?
acts. Are they
Equal application under the
constitutional?
law. This is what you're talking about, yeah?
Say that again.
Equal application under the law? Yeah.
Equal application, governmental immunity.
I'm not an attorney, and I know that shit.
Can one deliberately break the law and shield themselves from prosecution and claim immunity as if they don't qualified immunity? Does qualified immunity allow someone to deliberately make up a false crime if you're a prosecutor, but yet if another attorney were to do something similar, they would be jailed?
That sounds like a legislated backdoor excuse, runaround, whatever the hell you want to call it, for crimes under color of state.
That plain and simple. That's falls within.
Which, if I'm not mistaken, has already been legislated as a crime.
Well, it's a crime, and how many of these are being enforced under the
Well,
241
no,
and 242 US Code?
we can't enforce all these laws about crimes of
Well, we can enforce.
educated Americans. They paid a lot of money to go to these schools that feed wealth upwards. We can't be enforcing these ridiculous checks and balances laws when we've got all this drug war to enforce. Don't you understand?
Well,
It's a distraction. It's all a distraction.
You mean that the one can commit crimes with impunity and then shield themselves from the deliberate criminal acts and say they have immunity? That seems to be reminiscent of a star chamber, sovereign immunity, and the king can do no wrong. And one of the reasons the Revolutionary War was fought, and the reasons or alleged reasons that people here wanted to have a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, right?
Not the Pope. He's infallible. We've
don't have to be politically
made the
correct
Pope an
here.
idol.
It's true.
We've made the
Talk
Pope
is
into
wrong.
an idol. I mean, those people who still subscribe to the obsolete thing that we call religion.
Well, that's what I love. We're just telling it raw. Everybody can just share their opinions, and you know what? That's how it is. So we're not here to try and be politically correct. And if this is too hard for somebody to hear whatever they want to about religion or about our opinion on the judicial system, our opinion on, then so be it. We're not sugarcoating anything. It's raw and unedited.
I'm not trying to exaggerate anything either.
No.
I mean,
I appreciate your opinion. We'll get everyone that we have on our show will get a chance to say what they feel.
oh,
And we're going to have defense attorneys. I know any defense attorney over 10 years that I spoke with was upset about the unequal treatment
do you know what the great
among
thing?
attorneys with prosecutors.
Do you know what the great thing about it is, though? Is you're going to be able to get to see, also through everybody giving their honest opinions, you're going to be able to get to see their exposure to the different systems and the different
Yeah.
levels of.
Yeah, I don't want to censor you or
levels of
anyone else.
institutions and what. I mean, because the people who haven't been exposed to or had to deal with on a first-hand basis of a lot of the institutions and systems, I will predict will give you a much more faithful opinion. They haven't seen the atrocities and the abrogations of rights that occur at so many
Well, it's
levels.
a belief that
So
bad things don't happen to good
their generalized idea is going to be, well, I mean, this part's doing okay, and this part needs attention. I mean, I'll admit that myself, man. My thing is criminal proceedings, criminal courts, and civil rights because that's what I've seen, that's what I've experienced, that's what I've been through is some bullshit.
You know,
But I mean, I also feel like that's where my focus should be, since that's kind of the founding principles of the entire goddamn American experiment to begin
what
with.
happened to the proposition that it's better that 99 guilty people go free than the one innocent man be convicted?
Oh, are you kidding me?
I don't see that happening.
that
What is
was-
the burden of proof?
That
Where is
was
it gone?
also tossed out
Where
on
does
its
it need to go?
head all the way back to the New Deal and the Prohibition stuff.
You know, it needs to go somewhere. It needs to go somewhere.
Well, I mean, pick a sentence from any amendment of any article, and man, we probably got examples of it being violated
Well,
by some level of government. You know, it's
Well, you wrote something, Lincoln, that I want to bring up, and we'll probably do a series or even segments to go over them more. And that's and the coalition was just absolutely impressed. We've had others that have worked and have been working quietly. Some of those that we know and have worked with the sealed indictments. And for those of you that don't know about those, you may be learning more about those and the human trafficking that's going forward. But you wrote something with Reclamation of Liberty, you know, and,
Yes.
and I really want to hear about. And I'm sure the audience would like to know about that, and under the conditions you wrote that, and what inspired you to do that, and what is it about?
Oh,
The document.
that was again just the recognition of the whole founding of this nation from the perspective of the founding fathers is, let's do this American experiment where we've got these 13 nations.
And you wrote this while incarcerated, right?
Yeah.
How long was
it
it?
was
And what is it exactly?
2008, 2009. I don't even remember. I think it was 6 or 7 pages before I just stopped because I was just like realized that I shouldn't be the one writing those parts of it. Because really, after the first page, that's just, you know, some hypothetical and some experiential, not that well rounded, because I haven't seen all the different things in all the different places. But just from my own perspective, it's just some basic legislative sort of refreshers for reiterating the rights guaranteed by the American Constitution. The first couple of paragraphs are really the key point and salient points in the idea and the spirit of what the fuck we need to be doing. And frankly, at the time, I just sat down and I just, you know, I was just thinking one day, you know what is wrong with this fucking place is that there are no rights. A right is not something you have to fucking
Right should be inherent, right?
Right. Well, that's
It's
exactly
just a right.
inalienable, right?
Inalienable,
Inalienable. So how does a plea bargain exist in an inalienable situation of right to speedy trial?
Yeah.
How does that work? Because I mean, again, I'm running.
Well, the policies supersede the rights.
Well, we're getting back into the doublespeak
Right.
thing that Orwell likes to talk about and point out, and everybody's like, "Oh no, this is a terrible thing that's going to happen," and it's like, "No, you idiots! This is something that he's been observing his entire life. Like that whole book wasn't about the future."
Say that again.
Doublespeak.
No, not doublespeak, but who's been observing his whole life?
Come again?
Oh, I thought you named a person that had been.
Oh no, Orwell. Yeah.
Orwell. Oh, Orwell. Okay,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
The officer. In,
When he wrote 1984,
Okay, right,
The,
that's what I
double,
thought.
the concept of doublespeak was not like was not a thing about, oh, this will be in the future. You know, that was a thing that he was observing in the present when it was written. And I mean, it's implemented at the level of the legislative, where definitions are created and defined that are aberration or aberrative from a regular common English dictionary. You take a Black's Law Dictionary, a regular Oxford English or Webster's, Merriam-Webster, whoever, any common English dictionary, and open it up to random word, or start with the Law Dictionary because it's going to be in the other one, not necessarily vice versa. Pick a word, check it out. If it does happen to have listings for the same thing, they're not number 1 and number 2 in the same place. You know, no matter what word you look up, there is some sort of aberration from the regular common tongue, which I mean is, and then nobody wants to, you know, point this out. Everybody wants to smugly look down their nose at you that's gone through law school, the same as doctors do. You know, about, oh, you don't know your own body. Well, the lawyer's like, oh, you don't know your own language. You know, when they get to that level, it's subconsciously programmed in. Nobody's like, well, some of them are, but I would say the majority of them are maliciously going, oh, you don't know what you're talking about because we have this secret language that we know. Because they don't recognize it. It's done at a subtle level, but it's absolutely what is occurring.
Well, even as a new attorney, I noticed that it was very important to write definitions because I started to see arguments where the opposition would pick and choose what they would address, and plausible deniability became something that was really common. And then the real issues were not addressed, which still opens the door for bringing the argument back, because a lot of those things with crimes committed under color of state, that we need to look at the legislative intent, I think, a lot more, and look at those definitions. What was the intent behind the law? And if the intent is outdated or is not applicable to the current situation,
yeah, I mean, the only thing where I see any consideration of intent is, I believe, Montana with the de facto speed limits, where if you're driving a Camaro that's got a supercharged V8 and you got Z-rated tires, 120 is not unreasonable.
we look at them.
They still have posted speed limits, but there's some
strict
room,
liability crimes
some
and
room
intent.
for some
Intentional
intelligent
crimes, Kuwait
consideration by the people who have to enforce the law instead of just shove it down your throat legislation.
Well, it's just kind of begs the question sometimes of the inchoate crimes and what we determine to be a strict liability crime. That if you break the law, then that is a crime, or intent. If we look at a definition like the mental determination to commit a forbidden act, we could motive, we could actus reus, mens rea.
We can't give every case that kind of consideration, because otherwise we'd have to bring back mental hospitals and the colossal amount of beds that they served up from the 60s until we started phasing out in the 70s.
So does it seem like there's just been more of a shift from the mental hospitals over to the Department of Corrections?
It's more profitable to house an inmate than a patient.
Explain that a little bit, your opinion on that.
Well, prisons have been privatized, and the blood-sucking leeches of corporations like Aramark, and I'm not sure who runs the phone systems these days, but that's absolute extortion in every single sense of the word.
I know within 6 months I paid $3,000 or $4,000 for Brittany to have a comfortable stay for a crime that didn't exist in a human trafficking contract.
How much of that did you get
I
back?
got her out of. None of that. It's more or less. So
how
the proverbial rapist enjoyed the rape, but the victim didn't. We'll take $100 from you, and here, well, we know we did wrong. Here's $25 back, and thank God for that $25. We don't fuck you up more, right?
Essentially.
We can go into details, but that's really what I wanted the day to be about, is just for us to hit a variety of different topics, and then we can just kind of may appear all over the place, but we can hone in detail in any one of those.
We got to start with the big picture, and I think we're
throw out some of the ideas with the judicial system. We can look at constitutional rights, the Governmental Immunity Act.
These are, for me, that's the big issue. Observational realities. If you don't believe me, go catch a charge. I don't care if it's a misdemeanor or a felony, but if you expect to be treated fairly or decently or any of that nonsense, man, you're in for a rude fucking awakening.
And Lincoln and I have a plethora of evidence that I've kept for a number of years, and it is absolutely mind-blowing, astounding, shocking. Not only in my own personal life, just how many things I could prove with unimpeachable evidence of deliberate crimes that are committed in order to create something that wasn't there. Everything from kidnapping to murder to threats to duress to putting an ungodly amount of pressure on attorneys or an attorney that just wanted to do his job and protect the people. And Brittany did die in the cause of effort to free people, to liberate captive people, to give them a voice, and that's really what we want to do. And people would come to me and give me evidence that I have. Some of it just I think should be kept quiet. I'm not trying to bring the system down, but people need to start caring about what's happening to those that they consider criminals, because a criminal is a relative term. A felony if you were to look at federal or state laws, people without knowing it are probably committing several felonies a day, but not intentionally. Whether that falls within intentional criminal acts, inchoate acts, what is really kind of a scary thing when we try to get in the head of someone what they were thinking.
When there are so many laws, you could just arbitrarily enforce something against almost anyone. Then the entire system becomes a crony system. Like it's a political opposition. Like it's zero. Like you belong to one of these two parties. And you know what? They're starting to have to let libertarians in and some of the Green Party, and they've got a big enough.
Oh, they have to. The old guard seems to be broken up as far as the integrity of and the system that could band together. There's a lot of pockets left of the old guard, but I do see radical changes for good.
What I've expected since when Romney ran. Was that against Obama? Yeah.
Mitt Romney.
Yeah. That year, what I essentially foresaw and maybe just presumed more than foresaw coming was simply that, we're going to kill a political party, like we did the Whigs. Things happen in cycles. If that's all that we accomplish is killing one of these political parties, then all we've done is kick the can down the road. They both have to go. We have to organize under something else that is not filled with career politicians who have proven time and again that they're going to do nothing but bend over for lobbyists and corporations. How else do you have a below 25% approval rating of Congress for 80 plus years and still have their job?
For judges, what if they've got a judge that's making rulings that are absolutely unconstitutional? Have you found, or have a lot of us found, that the Judicial Conduct Committee is an effective way of asking a judge to recuse themselves, or do they? Or should we be filing malfeasance complaints, or should the public do a class action, or is it more effective to do individual suits so that it has more of a widespread effect? Or could the media be used? I mean, there's a variety of ways to expose corruption.
For as much time as we have to prosecute petty individual drug crimes and victimless nonsense, I don't see any reason in the world why the people who have committed crimes should not be named individually and put in their place as they deserve.
Under equal protection, right? I mean, as an officer of the court, I'm a special legal consultant now, and I've been given the honor of probably knowing a little bit too much for my own good. Although I do think the system is changing, and I do think that there needs to be more attorneys that will speak up. And I really give credit, but I'll have to say that in my experience, if you are to actually not back down to a hot button case, you need to risk losing children, family, freedom, life, finances.
That's because the way they've legislated all of these criminal acts into place is as soon as you birth a child, you've got a hostage that you're caring for.
Yeah, it tends to be this smear campaign, and then this quieting effect that once they hush you up and charge a crime with you, then the primacy effect takes place, and the narrative gets out in the media, and then a lot of the newspaper reporters aren't allowed or don't know how, or somewhere in between, to write an honest article about it.
And this is a reason, again, why we have to name individual actors and determine why and where they're getting either their instruction or that mental inability to the self-awareness to realize the ridiculousness of their acts in regards to the oaths they've sworn, the laws they're supposed to be enforcing in order of hierarchy and importance, like inalienable rights versus some legislative bullshit that we made up on the hem of.
I feel like I'm under oath to protect and defend the Constitution from all enemies.
Well, that oath,
it doesn't go away.
Has been sworn by more people than any oath to any court.
And as a citizen of the United States, whether you're naturalized or you're going by our citizenship here in the United States, which is jus solis. Sanguinis is by blood, but here, if you're born in the United States or born American, basically, there's a lot more sometimes to it than that in immigration law and naturalization. Then you're an American, or you're a member of the United States. You're a citizen of the United States of America.
Well, I started questioning what that meant at like age 14, 15.
You know, they've done some immigration law, criminal defense. These are just some of the issues that we're going to raise today. And, one thing I will say about this is we have other materials and other evidence, and we haven't mentioned names or for the most part, or other than some places and some general gripes and problems that we have, but we have evidence with details. We will not accept threats to us, to any one of us or any one of ours. The coalition has let us know, as well as those that have been charged with authorization and jurisdiction, to root out human trafficking, which you're going to see is becoming or has been a big problem. And I think it's good that it's coming to light. That means that we're addressing it and it's getting better. And we're looking for solutions, and we're looking for unity rather than
it's run into a lot of the same
fractured.
It's run into a lot of the same problems as the families of incarcerated persons.
Derivative victims almost.
A lot of people will not hear the truth, the facts. They'll do the smile and nod routine so that they can continue on with their lives and not, run with fucking torches and pitchforks to their representatives and Capitol buildings, because
I think it's going to get better. I really do.
Well, right. Hopefully they'll come around.
People are talking about it.
Hopefully at least if they'll just shut the hell up and stay on the sidelines, would be great. While the people who are, actually intelligently observing and paying attention to the
Use
world
some common sense, be a little
can
kind to
address
each other.
the issue,
Right.
I think we'll do fine.
I do too.
I'm
optimistic. It's just this past has been absolute hell to quietly go through this.
I'm
without
also
a voice.
optimistic.
Who's going to believe you, right? Who's going to believe
It's just
you?
really going to be incredibly sad if there are people still standing up for some of these people who have been involved in the pedophilia and human trafficking.
Well, and I found the more egregious.
And it's not just like children. It's not just like sex workers and shit. There's people that are being cycled through fucking restaurants that are like little labor groups, and I mean maybe
absolutely, you've
some
got
of
eyes to see.
Some of them are
You'll see 'em
indentures.
everywhere.
Some of them are outright slaves. I'm not sure exactly where you draw some of those lines, but I mean,
we need every citizen in the service. We need everybody caring about what's happening to other human beings. I mean, is it difficult to just care a little bit, to be a little kinder, to ask a few more questions? People need not be scared and be hesitant about standing up for what's right. Everybody knows what's right.
But that's
so do
also the purpose of these fear policies, going again all the way back to the drug war, is now we don't want to talk about it because there's all these other things that really have no relevance that are going to get flung up into our face and say, but this, but that, so that we don't have to listen to your legitimate complaints.
I think with the
Because you're on
people, I
drugs,
think the most
because you have
powerful tool we have is the
drugs in
people.
possession.
When people know they can't quiet it, they can't quiet it.
Well, the internet has unfortunately really fucked the whole control of information. So thank you, CERN, I think, started the whole...
Well, and really, and I, in a lot of ways, it's a double-edged sword. But the armed forces and the military and different special forces groups have been charged with authority in trafficking situations and others to root out the problem, given a lot of discretion to go in there, and some groups of people are being tried under the Uniform Code of Military Justice for crimes that may constitute treason and being an enemy to the United States. And
some of those things have already happened, and
are happening.
And the scary part about it is that a lot of this stuff is still under investigation. So a lot of these proceedings aren't public yet, and they really need to be sooner than later. Just so that people aren't so caught off guard by it that we end up, all on trains into camps again,
And that's scary. I mean, you think back to World War II time, to Korematsu was a case before the Supreme Court when, citizens of the United States who had Japanese heritage were rounded up and
Put in internment
and
camps.
put in internment camps out in Topaz, and that was here in the state of Utah, and that was thought to have been okay, or the American Indians, the Native Americans, the atrocities that occurred there. I mean, after a while.
To be fair, the only reason that they didn't do that after 9/11 with everybody of Middle Eastern descent is because of the internet and communications. That's so tapped into and so infiltrated by the Five Eyes, especially New Zealand, Great Britain, America, and I don't even remember Australia. But yeah,
serve your constitutional
They've
rights,
got such a
people.
circle jerk of Hail Marying or again flea flickering around the rights or the laws in their own countries that have been legislated. Is like, we just call it New Zealand. Hey, can you spy on these people for us because they're in our borders and we can't do that here. So it's like, what do we need the internment camps for when we can have absolutely every single one of their communication lines tapped into without permission, based on voice recognition, on that's being all of them being documented and recorded and stored in the NSA data servers. I mean, it's probably some of them in Bluffdale and whatever other centers they've got across the globe. I mean, I know there's one in the middle of Australia that's just kind of chilling. It's I think ARNet, an NSA site in Australian soil again. So there's some legal reasons for that.
We need to protect.
But yeah,
we need to protect good judges, good attorneys from institutions that are supposed to be used for regulating the practice of law rather than procedural weapons against those who stand up for people's rights.
It's imperative, because if we don't give them that support, they are there on the front lines in a manner of speaking, and they do see what's going on, and they will not, and I can't blame them, cannot stand up and put their necks out there on a damn chopping block if they don't have a little bit of support behind them, because people disappear all the time.
And the government, people need to start realizing when they're so terrified of the machine of the government. When you receive a legal document, there is a name that's placed on that document. Rather than, if people would stand up to that one name, whomever that name is that represents that is the rotten egg, so to speak. If they want to bring in conflict, then you go and you hit them hard, legally, with the defenses or with the offense that's applicable in that certain situation. And then let's see who the next person is who wants to put their name on it. And then you go after that person. Until people learn to have accountability and to think about whether or not it's worth it to deprive people of their constitutional rights. If it's no longer profitable, if it's no longer lucrative, if it's no longer worth it, then we're going to get some people. I think people want to do right if they could. I really do. I think people want to do the right thing.
Well, I mean, and it's and you get into a lot,
including the prosecutors,
a lot of them,
including the police.
You get into a lot of the language manipulation again, though, and the doublespeak, because everybody would like to do good to a degree, but they have a different idea of where those lines are. As attorneys or judges, there might be some, depending on individual, but there's some that probably look at, it's my job to interpret legislation or to enforce legislation, depending on where they're sitting on the fence. And even though the legislation is some asinine, ridiculous shit that makes sense to maybe like 10 people in some corporation somewhere, but they don't have the balls to say to the jury, there's this thing, jury nullification, where this is fucking ridiculous. And this is what will get this video fucking scrubbed from the internet. Well, jury nullification.
From the internet, because
jury nullification.
We've got channels. We'll send it. And plus, we want to thank the protection that we have from the special operatives that valiantly watch over us, and thank you, brothers. We love you, and we couldn't be here if it were not for protections and extending. I know my life has been extended several times in my freedom, and I'm grateful for the people I know of and for those that don't know. And every day's a gift. We're optimistic about things And we're going to turn some good out of these things, aren't
Oh
we?
man, and let's not neglect some of the really important, the spirit guides and the ancestors, and you know,
We need to be grateful for what we have.
People
This is a great nation.
People do not understand how much of a role they play in this dimension.
No, they don't. They don't. And I think it's important. I'm glad to see that there's an expansion of consciousness, and
In regard to
I'm also really. It's been a long night, hasn't it, Lincoln? But I'm encouraged when I see people being more patient and accepting of different points of view. Because I'm grateful people have radical opinions and voice those, because that gives me the right to have my own opinion, and others. We want people to be able to have a variety of ideas, as long as it doesn't encroach upon the freedoms of, to the point where people aren't free to speak and to live and to have a life of joy. We're supposed to have a good life here. It's not supposed to be
right.
suffering.
We're not supposed to
doesn't
be
have to
hung
be.
up on stupid shit like law. We realize law is just a branch of philosophy, and philosophy
it's
is
like
just a bunch of
kindergarten
guys
with
getting
big
together,
names.
thinking up some ideas,
Big
and saying,
words.
"Hey, let's try these on in reality and see if they work."
No,
and then we shouldn't be like approaching this like all hell this crazy philosophy of law, which we have. I mean, come on, man, come on. Like this is, if you're taking yourself that seriously, that you have no place in the position you're in as an arbiter of law. If you can't look at it in the grand scope of things and be like, gee, I'm a code enforcer, or you know, instead of a peacemaker, man, I don't care what the fuck your county or your state wants to call you. If you're not out there to serve in the interests of love and peace and pro-social, conduct and community building, you have no fucking business.
It doesn't have to be that
wearing
hard.
a badge
And this
or a
whole
robe.
right, and then this whole deal of people that are innocent, and clearly people know they're innocent, and then number one, they're not operating with the true preponderance of with the true beyond a reasonable doubt standard, and then once conviction takes place,
But how much
exonerated is, oh my god.
How much of these character assassination techniques that you're referring to have the prosecutors learned from who? Mass media.
Or
Because-
vice versa.
Right. And
They seem to have their ear.
And again, it becomes a circle.
seem to get the
But we have
bullshit
to,
story sometimes
must
in the past. It's getting better,
imperatively
though,
stop
hopefully.
scapegoating.
Well,
We
you know,
can't say it's the media. We can't say it's the party. We can't say any of this. That's what happened with Germany. The Nazis. Well, you know, if I'm not mistaken, the Nazis had people in power in positions.
now let's take the name of the
to
person
sign
that they want to put
sign
it.
all
They
these,
had
these different
that
laws into
document.
place.
That's the person that we question. It goes on from there. If you want to put your name on a document, you represent that agency or organization, and be prepared to get a letter from the people, get a letter from an attorney, get a letter from the organization, or be under investigation from those, should I say, of us, or those people that are investigating, you know, and been working, and doing
Quick
the
question. Quick question
indictments.
in that vein. Were there signatures on Project for a New American Century?
I can't say one way or another.
Interesting one to check, because I'll bet there's names.
You know, we're-
I'm pretty sure we've heard a lot of them in the past on the radio, over the air.
What do you think, Lincoln? I think we've got a good amount of issues raised here today. I've kind of enjoyed it. We could probably go on for hours and hours.
And we're still just
But,
getting started.
Oh, we're just getting started, for sure. And we absolutely haven't initiated our egos yet. And I started to come up with some really, really deep words and some great legalese, and try to show how smart I fucking am. You know.
And I'm just a dumb guy who's done 5 years in prison with 5 felonies and like 11 misdemeanors and hardly any. I didn't even finish high school. I GED'd out, and they forced me to get a diploma in prison,
I'll
which
tell you
was
what.
only a specialty credit away. I had more than enough credits.
I have
anyway.
nothing but respect for people who have to go through that.
So you
fucking
know,
prison
if
system.
it's this easy for regular Joe to be able to
Except
see
for the ones that need to be there.
and express and articulate, man, maybe just consider those people who aren't so able to articulate and what they're trying to say.
And false victims. I mean, if you're going to accuse somebody of a crime, whether a prosecutor or a victim, and you are deliberately lying, maybe the possibility should be that you could be charged under equal protection with the same severity of crime. Might be kind of a deterrent. You know, how do we pick and choose
Well, I
which
mean,
victims are
that's
sympathetic?
Equal
I mean,
protection
was Brittany
under
Cooper not
the law
sympathetic?
is an essential check and
I have
balance
faith in the
part of
law
that
that she-
system. If we don't have equal protection under the law, which is, you know, a governmental immunity type crap, which is basically sanctioned crimes under
Well,
federal
that's what
state.
needs to have review right away. Is the Governmental Immunity Acts,
Well,
the
and it's-
constitutionality
but
of how
part
they're
of
applied.
the equal protection under the law also means, however, that the doublespeak has to end.
Well, it
The
does.
language cannot be subject to arbitrary hijacking by whatever
Yeah.
jackass is writing Black's
It
Law
should be
Dictionary
easy.
this year.
Yeah, a lot of what Justice Scalia was saying with the original intent. I mean, not to say that everything has to be applied to the extreme, but it doesn't have to be that difficult. When we're creating doctrines to shield deliberate criminal acts, and when we're calling things RICO acts, and when we're, you know, I've seen syndicates more reminiscent of a RICO act with criminals operating under color of state. So that's what I prefer to call
At every
them.
level.
Is not government elected officials, but the people that are doing this are criminals pretending to be officials. Okay, they're not acting within the scope of their power. They're shielding themselves from deliberate criminal acts. But there are definitely
they're
the
just earning a
true-
salary paycheck
true-
from the government and driving a nice
True
fucking
service to the
car to
public,
work
there are.
every day and putting
Yeah,
on a
increasing.
smiling face in public and going out and shaking hands and smiling. That's the only difference, is they've been fucking twisted up into not being able to see their own culpability and accountability, again, partially due to all this scapegoating that we allow.
Well said. Well said. Well, we're going to have a variety of people come on the show from all different types. Of,
Man,
everyone from what we call convicts. I mean, we need to bridge that gap because it's gotten so widespread that almost everybody knows a felon. I mean,
Right,
felons get shit
that's
done,
pretty easy.
honestly.
But we need to, we're
They'll
gonna
have one work for you.
We're gonna have some perspectives, though. We're gonna have like the loved ones of felons. You know, the
Oh,
loved ones of
absolutely.
people.
How
who
much
have
does it
done
cost
time,
with the
like-
phone calls, right?
It depends on what time, what place. I mean, I think the last time I was incarcerated in Utah, 50 cents a minute.
You know, I had
In,
I had some
the
clients-
digital age,
I had some
when
clients that was almost at $300,000 over the course of 15 years that they'd spent just for phone calls, just to talk to each other on phone systems that were outdated, that were inappropriate, that were, you know, pathetic service, and it's almost like it was deliberate. You know, to have to buy extra food and buy pillows and hygiene packets when you're going to take somebody as a human being and put them in your custody as a ward of the state, then you need to take care of them. They should live at least, even my wife's killer, if and when he is brought and is tried, or they that were responsible, because it
should be
seems to be
subject
subject
to
to
the prison
the best
system.
possible standards available, because that's the only way we do honor, and that's the only way I can do honor to her, is put aside anger and look at the problem and see that these people are treated with respect and that they have the best defense, that they have food and shelter that at least is equivalent to a middle income American to be under equal protection. Because if we're dropping below, we're punishing people on punishing people, and I don't want those attachments on me.
if we're gonna
want
continue
that.
to lie to the world about being the land of the fucking free, then you know,
We are the
well,
freest
then
of
we
any
deserve
island.
whatever we
We're
have
for
coming.
that.
If we're gonna actually be about the land of the free, then we should not have any desire and the greatest reluctance in the world to incarcerate anyone for anything. And anybody who's so atrociously socialized or not socialized that we need to remove them from society, we should gladly pay the bill for that.
And take care of them and offer real help with real therapy. We should be treating these people with therapies that actually reform them. They should
If an abused or neglected child develops antisocial behavior because of this abuse or neglect, it serves no rhyme, reason, or purpose to put them into a system that gives them abuse and neglect. This is how you perpetuate a cycle. This is not how you correct anything.
Well, and you know what I faced a lot of times was this, and I felt sorry for some of my clients, and I can prove this too, is there were many times it were provable that we would have a client that had a case that should have been easy, and if it ended up being a hot button case and they didn't want to give us all the evidence, or we pushed the envelope more, there would be some point where the client may or may not have been approached by the wrong side, or the side that should not be approaching a represented person, and offered a better deal than quiet if they were to turn on me or us. And so it's almost a game of trying to defend yourself in a way that you could absolutely protect yourself from someone coming after you, because they're under duress and they're going to get a better deal, they think,
that's exactly
from criminals acting under color of state.
That's exactly
not everyone's
where
like that,
the RICO. That's exactly where the RICO statutes do come into play, though, that you mentioned.
Right.
Like that's where you like. There's no any which way about it. This is criminally organized conduct. As soon as you talking to another person saying, "Hey, go get evidence," and they're a private citizen, that's at that point you have now conspired with them, and you were both guilty of conspiracy.
Or the
person, the rat, and the prosecutor or cop or whoever the hell has said, "Hey, let's have you go do our job for us while we lie to you about a deal you're not going to get."
Yeah, and then the person who's not been exposed to that type of criminality, that level of criminality, who's going to believe them if these are just, and that tends to be one of the tactics. It's let's go ahead and charge a person with this absurd crime for something.
Use that to impugn their credibility.
And then once you start, no one will believe that. But there's a very, very strong group of us that have combined that do have all the evidence, including recordings, audio, video, documents, timestamps, and things that can absolutely prove with time, date, name, place, just a plethora of things. And so we don't want any repercussions. I will not tolerate them any longer for being a whistleblower. They could take on a life of their own, and I care about our system. But I'll tell you what, I will defend myself, and I won't be apologetic about it. I think that people can probably take a chance to reform. If people don't want to change their ways and do the right thing, then they do need to be removed from office.
Well, the coalition's got a lot of names. A lot of names and a lot of signatures and sponsorships of bills and I mean they've got a lot of people who it's just going to take a while to get to all of them. I mean, some of them might have some time to get their shit together before their priority.
And we need to start looking at how cases are being filtered.
Helping be a part of the solution instead of a continuation of the problem.
And judges come and go, but the clerks stay. And it's very important that we understand how these cases are being filtered and routed to different judges at different times.
Right.
As well.
And the coalition is also accepting evidence and documents from people of localities who have seen some of these same things at their community levels or
there's a coalition
levels.
Member that I'm aware. I didn't realize how big it had gotten. I mean, but there are basically like the old guard that were depriving people of their constitutional rights. There are absolute friends to our government who are embedded and silently taking note and documented to see how cases will go about, to see if those in power do get the point and are changed, or whether or not to investigate and indict them, and they're following it all the way up. And they may not do anything, like some of the judges that had their hands tied, and I didn't realize that at first, could not do anything, or they would risk being removed. And their true intentions, they might have had to wait and to bite their tongue proverbially until they were able to act. But now people's freedoms are being loosened, and we need to all exercise those more. And be grateful.
And the patience that has been exercised by these watchers of the watchers has been beyond forgiving and then
Oh.
that clock's
Oh
ticked
my
out.
God.
There's not very many grains left to sand in that. in that.
You know, there have been people executed for much less than some of the things that, been going
that
on.
we've got
you know, I'm not joking about
documentation on.
that. But not here to be a downer, but it's nice that we can have these discussions. I mean, I don't know that this would have been possible, but, you know, it's a lot of pressure to feel like you're the only one out there. And I know you have, and I know there's people that have been incarcerated, and these are human beings, and what can they hope for? You know,
In
what
the
can they hope
land
for?
of liberty, where we just stuff all of
This
our,
isn't the way to make
all of
money out
our
of other people's
mentally
suffering.
ill
That's not justice.
and abused and neglected people under the rug that we call corrections. It's atrocious. This is not what we're about. This is not what this country's about.
Time
This
to
is
change
not
it.
what
Time to simplify.
any of us are about as individuals. So how is it that it's individuals that are fucking signing off on this shit?
You know,
We're gonna find every fucking name.
and anyone that has anything, I will say, and I'm always gonna do that until I see that Brittany Annette Cooper receives the justice she deserved. It just makes me sick to think how many people are victimized that weren't victims. They're victimized for telling the truth, for being good people, for being hurt and then being punished for being hurt, and then being demonized, and then being lied about, and then everyone just believing that must be the case without any sort of honest investigation whatsoever.
Nah, people, stop believing all the bullshit you hear from somebody just because they
Question
work for the
everything.
government. You don't trust the government? Why the fuck do you trust the individuals who work for
And
them?
start looking at the individuals too. Who are the individuals
Yeah,
that
it's
are
not-
the government?
They is over.
They
There's
is
no
over.
more fucking they.
You put your name on a document, just be ready that you may receive an indictment, and it may not come today or tomorrow. But you know, people are taking note in your office. There are people in prosecutors' offices in every city, in every town, in every township,
They notice.
in every
They
fucking
see what's
community.
going
There's
on.
somebody doing it. They may be a janitor. They may be a lot more than meets the eye. Maybe we are, maybe we're not. But I'll tell you what, we're all citizens of the United States of America, and or people that are within these lands, and we need to respect human beings and rights and freedoms. And without those, you know, life loses its savor. We're not here to be slaves. We're here to be free, and I'm free. And it's nice to be free. Isn't it, Lincoln? It's nice to be free.
It's an incredible place to be.
Anyway, we hope that we're not going to have some fucking benediction and prayer, are we? We're going to probably pray. Although Lincoln is an ordained minister.
I mean,
He is.
if people aren't already praying
Actually, damn
or
good
meditating
spiritual.
at
Nice guy.
at their own level, like, I mean, I've been trying to get people
Yeah,
on
we're not
board and
starting
caught up
religion
for a
here.
long time. That's
Stupid
not my
cult.
job or responsibility anymore. I got work to do. So no, I don't think we're going to do that. We're going to say you guys need to be on top of yourself. You need to look within to find the answers that you're seeking, because you cannot trust the institutions that have lied to you and your parents and their parents for this long.
And you guys know who you are that have been committing crimes under color of state. And those of you who think you're getting away with things, you're not. I would encourage you to change, to forsake, so to speak, your criminality, and to unite. And you know, there should be forgiveness in a way for people to come back that have been caught up in the system. And I understand that there have been some atrocious things go on, but at least maybe you haven't given these people the same benefit that have been in prison, but you need to change, or we're going to remove you, or other people are. The people are not going to have it anymore. The few people aren't going to control everyone else anymore. And you know, there are other methods besides the court system for change that are legal.
Well, we've had this wonderful
To try
shift in
things in the
consciousness.
court of public opinion.
We've had this wonderful shift in consciousness, so you know how it's going to go. Problem, reaction, solution. Turnabout's fair play.
Yes, it is. Well, Lincoln, we're going to go ahead and
Have fun.
shut the video off.
Enjoy.
We'll get some good conclusion or some
Whenever
music next
ride.
time.
It's too big.
Oh, and you're not touchscreen.